Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we're going to be looking at another Nemesis pre-constructed deck, which is the Mercenaries, which is a black deck which is all about the Mercenaries, which are one of the main tribes of Mercadian Masks block. So let's take a look at the deck list. 23 creatures, which is a lot. 6 enchantments, 4 sorceries, 3 instants, 1 artifact, 23 land. Quite a big variety of creatures here, which is always, I think, a bit of a warning sign, but we'll get into it. Let's have a look at some of these mercenaries. So, we've talked about mercenaries a bit before, when we were looking at the Mercadian Masks Disruptor deck. If you've seen that, if you've not, maybe go and see it after this. But so mercenaries were the opposite of rebels. So they usually have this like recruitment ability where you pay a cost, you tutor up another mercenary, and you get it straight into play. But the thing is, so rebels who are mostly white tutor up. So like a cheap rebel tutors for the next most expensive rebel, and you do a chain that way. Mercenaries tutor down, which makes thematic sense that like the bigger, stronger guy recruits a smaller, weaker kind of minion, but it does make them a lot weaker, and this is not a good time in Magic history to be to be a black creature, just because they're usually quite weak and have usually horrible drawbacks, so are really badly costed. But we'll look at them. So we have like a random grab bag here of like recruiter creatures. So Catarambru is a 2/2, gets a mercenary with cost 2 or less, which is not many. There's not that there's not many mercenaries. It's just with that are cost 2 or less. It's just whether or not you really want to be doing that. Cataran Kidnappers is a 4/2 that gets ones who cost 3 or less. Cataran Enforcer is a 4/3 with Fear, so he's actually fairly decent in terms of stat wise, but he gets mercenaries that cost 4. Rathy Intimidator has got Fear as well. He's a 2/1, gets mercenaries that cost 2 or less. Rathy Fiend is a 2/2 for 4. When he comes into play, every player loses 3 life. Brilliant. And you're just what you want on your 4 mana 2/2, like something that makes you lose life. He gets things of cost 3 or less, and then Rathy Assassin is one of the rares of the deck, who recruits mercenaries who cost 3 or less, but also has the ability where it can destroy tapped non-black creatures. So kind of like a really disappointing mashup of like Royal Assassin and another mercenary like recruiter. But it's kind of like the best we've got, honestly. It doesn't get much better from here on out. Because these I feel like some of the better creatures in the deck. But let's look at see what these guys could recruit. It's some horrible mercenaries. So Misshapen Fiend is a 1/1 flyer for 2. That's it. Rampart Crawler is a 1/1 for 1 that can't be blocked by walls. Alright. Spineless Thug is a 2/2 for 2 that can't block. Like, okay. And Skulking Fugitive is a 3/4 for 3, which you'd think is like, oh, that's pretty good stats. But then whenever he becomes the target of a spare ability, he is sacrificed. So that's dreadful as well. So not exactly like there was a reason rebels were better than mercenaries. I mean, there were several reasons rebels were better than mercenaries, and it's just because a lot of mercenaries were just kind of bad, honestly. So we have a few more these are slightly better mercenaries. These are the ones you would want to recruit first. So Ali Grifters is a 2/2 for 3. Whenever it becomes blocked, the defending player discards a card. That's okay. It kind of forces a kind of a tough decision on an opponent. Like, do they want to let it kind of go through, or do they want to block it and discard and lose a card? So not terrible. Strong Arm Thug is just a 1/1 for 3, which is obviously pretty weak, but when it enters the battlefield, you get a mercenary from your graveyard back into your hand, so it's okay. It's very limited raise dead effect. Phyrexian, it's crazy to think though, for like 1 extra mana you have Gravedigger, who is not only a 2/2 but gets any creature. He could have been a 2/1 Strong Arm Thug. Anyway, Phyrexian Prowler is 4 mana for a 3/3. which it's like, oh, that's maybe okay stats for the time. It has fading 3, so it's gonna die in like 3 turns after you cast it. Fading is one of the mechanics introduced in Nemesis. Um, Basically, every upkeep you remove a fading counter. If you can't remove a fading counter, then it gets sacrificed. And this is a creature that can use its fade counters as a resource, which we've seen a little of in the other pre-constructed decks. There was a green one that could use its fade counters to destroy artifacts. There was a white one that could use its fade counters to prevent damage. This one removes its fade counters to do extra damage or buff up its stats. Not great because you haven't really got any ways of getting haste. So you play this, it has fading 3. Next turn, you take a fading counter off it, so it has fading 2. You swing with it, it's got 2 fading counters on it. Okay, you remove it, it's 5/5, I suppose, and then next turn it dies. It's just not great. And then Phyrexian Driver, 3 mana for a 1/1, but when it enters the battlefield, all other mercenaries get +1/+1 to the end of turn. But it is all mercenaries on the board, not just yours. So if there is a mercenary mirror match, firstly, God help you if you're in that situation. But yeah, be careful because it'll help your opponent as well. But also just 3 mana for a 1/1 with a tribal specific buff ability is, yeah, not great. And then a few more random creatures here. So Carrion Wall is just a 3/2 wall. It has regeneration. Fine. Again, like kind of overcosted for what it does, I think. Battlefield Percher, 5 mana for a 2/2 flyer. It can only block creatures with flying, and you can pay 1 card, 1 black to give it +1/+1 to the end of turn. Not dreadful, but like definitely bad. For some reason, I was expecting it to be a mercenary. It's not, so you can't even tutor it up. So I don't really know why it's in the deck, honestly. A single Catarambru summons, because that's what you want in your mercenary tribal deck. One copy of a spell that actually has like fairly decent synergy. Because there wasn't, I don't think, like a rebel version of this in white. So this would have been something like the mercenaries had over rebels, like this kind of a specific tutor. But no, we'll just have 1 copy of that, I suppose, to search up your mercenaries. And then Bell-Base Portal. So this is a good card, I think. 5 mana, when it comes into play, choose a creature type. 3 tap, put a creature card of the chosen type from your hand into play. That's a decent card. Like, I had a friend who used to use this card in a deck in like a dragon deck. So he would just like drop out dragons, kind of like instant speed, because it can be done at instant speed for like 3 mana, and circumvent the really high casting cost that dragons usually have. It's a good card. It doesn't belong in here because the cost to use it, 3 in tap, that is usually, like, a lot of your mercenaries are quite cheap. You're basically gaining nothing by putting something into play with Bell-Base Portal over just casting it normally. The one thing I can think of is that it can be done at instant speed, which that has its advantages. But yeah, like that is it. That is it. A lot of the other creatures here, they already cost 3 or less. So yeah, it's a good card. It's kind of it's a little wasted in here. It's a little redundant. And then a kind of suite of black spells here. 2 Haunted Crossroads. So Haunted Crossroads, I think, is actually fairly okay. I was going to say good. Good is probably a bit too strong. 3 mana for a black enchantment. 1 black, put a creature from your graveyard on top of your library. So it locks you out of a draw, which is not brilliant. But it is cheap. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Back in the day, I used to think it was very powerful, but like now I see it and just like, oh, cool. Well, I'm never drawing new cards if I'm using it. But if you do need to get like one of your better creatures back, you do have the option of doing it. Intimidation is a little spicier. 5 mana for an enchantment. Creatures you control basically have fear, which is quite good. Obviously, if you're playing against a deck that's not using artifact creatures or black creatures, your whole board becomes unblockable, essentially, which is quite strong. Quite surprised this is uncommon, actually. I would have expected that to be rare, but yeah, that's okay. Parallax Dementia, 2 mana aura, enchanted creature gets +3/+2. When it leaves play, destroy the enchanted creature, and it has fading 1. So you put this on something, say it's something that can attack that turn. You get this for like 2 turns. Yes, because you would play it. Next turn you would remove its 1 fading counter. Then the turn after that, you can't remove the fading counter, so it dies. So you can put it on a creature as like a kind of a really janky like buff spell, or you put it on an opponent's creature as a really janky removal spell if you just wait 2 turns. But 3 of them, lucky you. And then 1 Seal of Doom. So talked about the seals quite a bit. This is a cycle in Nemesis where they're enchantments. You put them down, you can sacrifice them, and they kind of replicate a iconic spell. So this one does Dark Banishing. Talked about it a lot. I think it's different enough from just having, because like the advantage to have. So if you have Dark Banishing in hand, that's fine. It's a surprise factor. You can spring it in the middle of, your opponent doesn't know you have it, but you have to keep 3 mana open to cast it. Whereas Seal of Doom, if you just have a turn where you've got 3 mana open, you can drop this down, and then it's ready for when you need it. The downside being your opponent knows that it's waiting for them. And that can work as a deterrent to be like, oh, I won't play my big creature because they'll use Seal of Doom on it. Or they play something else and like try and bait you into using it early. But I think it's okay. 1 Massacre. Massacre's actually alright. If an opponent controls the plains and you control the swamp, you can play it without paying its mana cost. All creatures get -2/-2 on end turn. So, not a board sweep. It's like it's not strong enough for a board sweep, but like kills a lot of weak creatures. Good anti-rebel tech because they're obviously going to have a plains because they're playing rebels. A lot of the rebels are usually quite small, so this would have been pretty satisfying, I think, to play against a rebel deck. Even if you don't cast for free, I think 4 mana for this effect is okay. Because Infest is 3 mana for -2/-2 to everything. So 1 extra mana is like, that's sort of okay. Like, it's not very overcosted. It's a little overcosted, but not very. But the fact that you can potentially play it for free is I think, very good. Mind Swords. This is kind of interesting. So 2 mana, sorcery. Each player exiles 2 cards from their hand. If you control a swamp, you can sacrifice a creature instead of paying its mana cost. That's interesting. I don't know what to think about it. Like, dropping this turn 2 is kind of a is absolute. He's even T-posing to assert dominance in the art. So yeah, like, that's kind of crazy if you wanted to do that. But it's okay. I don't really know what to think about Mind Swords. It's like symmetrical discard. Well, it's not even discard. It's just straight up exile. Yeah, don't know what to think about Mind Swords. It's all right. I don't know. Might need your comments below to see what you think of Mind Swords. I mean, the thing is, with symmetrical effects like this, you can always play around it. If like you don't like, oh well, I've got Spineless Thug and a Misshapen Theed. I don't mind exiling them, but your opponent might not be so lucky. They might have to exile something better. But yeah. 2 Dark Rituals, which is pretty standard to have in a black deck. Dark Rituals is just really good. Not much to say about it, other than I do not like that art. I think that's the worst Dark Ritual art. And then Dark Triumph, which is 5 mana, creature you control get +2/+0 to end of turn. That's very overcosted for the effects. Trumpet Blast does the same, and it's 3 mana. But if you control a swamp, you can sacrifice a creature instead of paying its mana cost. You've got plenty of creatures to sacrifice, and sacrificing a creature to give you a whole board +2/+0 that's fine. So that's okay, Dark Triumph. That's all right. So what could have been? Yeah, this one's pretty weak. There's a few changes I would have made to it. So I think it would have been interesting to have Death Pit Offering. So this is a kind of crazy 4 mana enchantment. When it comes to play, you sacrifice all your creatures, but then your creatures have +2/+2 going forward. I just think that could be interesting because you've got Dark Rituals in this. You could potentially power that out turn 2, lose nothing really, and then you've got a much bigger board for the rest of the game. Your creatures are then actually quite decently costed then for their size. So that would have been a potential. I don't know over what. I can't remember what the rare was. Oh my god, I've actually generally forgot what the rare was. So there was the Wrath the Assassin. I can't remember what the other rare was. Oh well. Shows how good this deck is. I can't remember what the rares in it were. Vicious Hunger, I think, would have been okay as a cheap like burn spell. Highway Robber it really surprised me Highway Robber is not in any of these like mercenary themed decks, just because I think he's not good, but for the time he was okay. Like 4 mana for a 2/2 that drains an opponent for 2, and Primeval Shambler 5 mana for 3/3 with a pump ability. Again, like not good, but okay, better than some of the stuff in here. So in summary, yeah, this one's pretty weak, I think. It just has like this really kind of like just grab bag of random mercenaries, like random like bad mercenaries. But I think that's kind of all the mercenaries that were available, really at the time. It's just all the mercenaries are just they're just really overcosted, or they just have like bad stats, or they have like really bad drawbacks. It's a shame because like thematically, I think it's cool to have like big mercenaries. They go and recruit smaller mercenaries, and like there's a lot of potential synergy there. Um, but yeah, maybe one day we'll have like Return to Mercadia, and mercenaries will get another crack at it. But yeah, overall, I wasn't too impressed by this one really. But what did you think? Did you ever have this deck? Did you play it? Did you make any changes to it? I'd really like to know. Stick a comment below. Let's start a discussion about it. But I will be back next time to look at the last pre-constructed deck from Mercenaries, from Nemesis. But until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a good day.